Let's go through these 11 mechanisms of drug action. To put it another way, there are 11 ways that we can perturb or alter the synapse. 11 specific ways, 11 targets that drug companies can target to try to alter the work of the synapse, or your local neighborhood drug dealer, whatever you're into. Now, these, let's talk about how to read these boxes. The blue boxes are agonistic mechanisms, those that increase the work of the synapse. The pink, whatever color this is, boxes are antagonistic mechanisms. Remember, antagonistics slow down, disrupt the work of this synapse. Okay, these boxes have three lines of information. By far, the most important is the first line. The first line describes the mechanism, and that's what we're going to go over one by one. The second line just reminds you this is agonistic or antagonistic. The blue boxes again are all agonistic. Now the third line is what confuses people. Don't even worry about this. But if you insist, it's an example of a drug that works with this mechanism on this neurotransmitter system. Same here. This is the drug. In this case, it's a poison, but same idea. And this is the neurotransmitter system it acts on. This is the drug. This is the neurotransmitter system it acts on. Okay? But this is not important to me. By far, by far, by far, by far, what's important is the mechanism. Let me pull out my handy eraser. So, mechanism one. I can give you a drug that serves as a precursor. Or to say it a different way, drug is precursor. So think about it this way. This is a simple way to think of it. Precursors are your building blocks. Neurotransmitters are your buildings. Enzymes are your construction crew. Building blocks, construction crew, buff guys with muscles. And this is your building. If I give you more building blocks, you're potentially going to make more buildings. That's why this is agonistic. Let's continue because it's a domino effect. I give you more blocks, your enzymes make more neurotransmitters. So you're going to pack more vesicles. That means more vesicles will be released per action potential. More vesicles released translates, of course, to more neurotransmitters released. The more neurotransmitters get released, the more receptors can get activated. And receptor activation is your agonistic signal. Now, mechanism two is an antagonistic mechanism. In this case, we're going to give you a drug that's going to inactivate your construction guys, or inactivate the enzyme, of course. Now, you have building blocks, fine. But if you don't have the enzyme to make neurotransmitters, no buildings for you. If you cannot convert precursor to neurotransmitter, you can't make neurotransmitter. Let's follow the domino effect. If you don't make as much neurotransmitter, that means you don't package as many vesicles. That means you don't release as many per action potential. That means less stimulation, which means agonism. Boop. Antagonism. Antagonism. Now, mechanism 3, I could give you a drug. This is antagonistic again. I could give you a drug that prevents storage of neurotransmitter in vesicles. So, mechanism 3, it's hitting our B stage, right? Well, if I can't make vesicles, I can't release neurotransmitter. If I can't release neurotransmitter, that's antagonism for you. Mechanism 4, agonistic. I could give you a drug that stimulates release of neurotransmitter. Remember, these vesicles need to move towards the membrane. Well, we can speed up that process. Now, the faster vesicles move toward the membrane, the more of them are liable to make it to the membrane and get released. And the more neurotransmitter you release, the more receptors will get activated, and you have your agonistic effect. Mechanism 5, we're back to antagonism. I can inhibit that very process. The very process that we were just talking about, the transport movement of vesicles to the membrane. You can slow it down. If I slow down the movement of these vesicles, fewer of them will get released. The fewer that get released, the fewer receptors will get activated. We have antagonism. And I know probably by now your eye has gone to the example drugs. I don't care that you learn these drugs. You are going to be responsible for some drugs, uh, but I will explicitly tell you what those are. These, just ignore them unless you have special interest and you're just curious. Okay. Now, mechanism 6 and 7 are special, and I'm going to come back to them. Let's jump to mechanism 8 real quick. Mechanism 8. I could give you a drug that stimulates your autoreceptor. This is antagonistic. If that confuses you, it's because you're forgetting what autoreceptors do. Remember that autoreceptors are a stop signal. So if I stimulate the stop signal, does it make more sense why that's antagonistic? You're slamming on the brakes. The brakes on what? The brakes on further neurotransmitter release. Remember what autoreceptors did in stage H. Now, again, it might seem counterintuitive, but these you just have to mentally flip them uh, uh, for it to make sense. Mechanism 9, drug blocks those same autoreceptors. How is this going to be agonistic? Remember, this is your brakes. So it's like I cut your brake lines. So you're hitting the brake pedal, but nothing's happening. If you blocked autoreceptor, it's like cutting your brake line. You will not stop neurotransmitter release. So you will release excessive amounts. Mechanism 10 and 11 we already talked about because this mechanism 10 is blocking reuptake. We talked about how modern antidepressants, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and also serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors work by blocking or inhibiting reuptake. If you don't clean it up, if you don't suck up the neurotransmitters, they're liable to find their way back to the receptor and re-stimulate. Similarly, I could give you a drug that inactivates the destructive enzyme, the enzyme that is chewing apart your neurotransmitter. If I inactivate the destroyer, then more neurotransmitters will hang out in the cleft. And again, one of those neurotransmitters is liable to find its way back to the receptor and zap, and that's agonism. Now, in the next video, we'll talk about mechanism 6 and 7, and we'll talk more deeply about postsynaptic receptors.